Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. How do you feel? For so many of us, when we're navigating menopause, finding that sense of calm in the middle of all this chaos can seem impossible. And it seems like we just have to work through it. But what if there's a better way? Today, we're exploring mindfulness and meditation for menopause. And it's not about sitting cross-legged for hours or, chanting some unfamiliar mantras. It's about discovering practical ways to quiet your mind and ease your symptoms. Get ready to learn how a few minutes of mindfulness each day could transform your menopause journey. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get more real insights. I am thrilled to welcome Diana Winston to our show today. Diana is the Director of Mindfulness Education at UCLA Mindful. She's been teaching mindfulness since the 90s and even spent a year as a Buddhist nun in Burma. Now that's dedication. Diana's written several books, including The Little Book of Being, and she's developed programs that have trained hundreds of mindfulness teachers worldwide. The Los Angeles Times calls her one of the nation's best-known mindfulness teachers. I can't wait for her to share her wisdom with us about mindfulness and meditation for menopause. Diana, thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited about getting into a conversation about mindfulness. And you've been called one of the nation's best-known teachers of mindfulness by the Los Angeles Times, and your work at UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. I knew that was going to be a tongue twister for
It's
me.
actually, I'm in a new center now. It's called UCLA Mindful because we've sort of shifted over into the health system. So it's easy to say and remember now. It's just UCLA Mindful.
But what I'm really curious about is to where this all began. Can you take us back and maybe even before you became a Buddhist nun in Burma? What was that about, and how did those experiences shape your mindfulness journey?
Absolutely. Um, yeah, I got started with mindfulness right after college. I was traveling around Asia and I ended up in Dharamsala, India, which is where the Dalai Lama has the government in exile there. And everybody around me was practicing Buddhist meditation, and I wasn't really interested. I was considered myself more of an activist. And but I don't know if it was like peer pressure. Everybody was doing it. There was so compelling, so beautiful that I ended up taking a meditation retreat and starting to learn a little bit about the philosophy. And I had a big moment of understanding that essentially, with all the insanity of the world, all the ups and downs in my life, and at that point, I was in my early 20s and there was all sorts of drama and nothing's going on, but that there was a possibility of a peace that was sort of not dependent upon conditions, that we could have a mind that could be okay even in the midst of all of what was happening with the world. And when I heard that, I just went, okay, that's it. That's for me. And so I dove into meditation. I went to Thailand and I did my first mindfulness meditation retreat where I was, practicing mindfulness like 15 hours a day and for about 10 days. And then I came back to the US and went back and forth to Asia and the US practicing mindfulness. So I did that for about 10 years, studying it in monasteries and retreat centers, doing long meditation retreats. And ultimately, as you mentioned, I became a Buddhist nun for a year where I lived in a monastery in Myanmar, Burma, and practiced mindfulness full time. So all of that were my kind of early years. And then when I came back, I was asked to train to teach. And so that started my teaching career. I realized I was very interested in how would these teachings be taught to a secular audience, to an audience that didn't need to be done within the Buddhist context, but they were accessible and available to anyone. And that's when I connected with UCLA, and I've been there the last 18 years or so.
I can't even imagine the types of experiences that you had in all of those travels and that time spent. Was there one that really stood out to you and maybe had the most impact on your practice?
Oh my God, there's so many things. I think one of the things that was very striking for me when I spent that year in the monastery is, as a young person, I was very driven. I was sort of hyper driven to succeed in school and in my career. And although my career at the time was really just meditating, but I took that kind of type A personality into meditation essentially. And when I was involved in this with this teacher in these monasteries, they're very big, kind of pushing you to like succeed in meditation, which in their concept and culture means to get enlightened, right? Which we
Okay.
could have long discussions on what that means, but they have a very specific sense of it, and as essentially the uprooting of all the greed in your mind and hatred and confusion in your mind. So when I started meditating, I was like trying to do that really, really hard and practice hard and be free from all the suffering. And what I came to, I think probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned was that sort of aggressive attempt to get rid of all these negative things in me was really about a denial of myself, a non-acceptance of who I was as I was. And that it took me, in some sense, working as hard as I could, falling apart, and then realizing that this person as I am was good enough. And so there was a profound lessons in self-acceptance and connection to myself and compassion. And these were lessons that have, been a lifetime set of lessons, but it was a real turning point for me in my 30s when I was in the monastery.
Can we just take that a little step further? Because I feel that there are so many women that are in midlife and menopause and going through some things, and they're so far away from that point that you just mentioned of like self-acceptance. And is there anything that you could speak to about that, and how can women connect to that?
Well, I do think that, as we age, self-acceptance often begins to come more naturally on its own. Like, and maybe after menopause or through menopause, there's like this kind of like, this is who I am. I mean, I know a lot of people who in their 50s and 60s saying like, this is the best decade of my life, right? But the cultural conditioning around self-judgment and self-criticism, self-hatred, the inner critic is so, so profound, so intense. And what is amazing about doing different kinds of practices like mindfulness and self-compassion is that they're built-in practices for cultivating more kindness and compassion for yourself. And there's a whole protocol called mindful self-compassion where you can learn over 8 weeks how to bring compassion. I teach a course called Cultivating Self-Compassion. But what it is working, it's three different levels, right? So it's one is using mindfulness to work with the difficult thoughts, because a lot of our thinking is what's wrong with me? I don't like myself. I don't like how I look, right? All those thoughts. So we use mindfulness to catch those thoughts and really like direct attention away from them and come back to our breathing, come back to our sense of self and not get lost in the thoughts. So one of the main teachings of mindfulness teaches us that we don't have to believe everything we think. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts are coming and going, right? So we learn that. So that's one aspect of it. And then that's coupled with compassion practices that help us to kind of really change the way that we feel about ourselves. So you actually deliberately send kindness to yourself over time, and you can send it to yourself as a child. You can imagine your dog sending kindness to you. You could be like, but it's a practice of using phrases like, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be at ease, may I accept myself just as I am. And it's not affirmations, because it's not like I accept myself as I am. It's like it's this wishes and hope. And as you do that and begin to feel it as a more embodied sense, things begin to change. So it's the working with the thoughts, changing the feeling, changing the way we relate to ourselves. And then the third component is recognizing our shared humanity, that we're not the only one, that everyone is dealing with this. And when we're going, I know for myself in the moments where I just, what a jerk, why did I do that? I just take a breath and okay, I'm not the only one. I'm not alone. There's so much spaciousness and ease that comes with that. So that's kind of like the methodology for working with self-compassion as I understand it and teach it. And I agree. It's absolutely, I see it people of all ages, although I do think it gets easier as we get older.
Well, I hope you're right about that. No.
People
Because,
anyway.
yes, because it still feels like sometimes it is a struggle on a daily basis, and especially when you're comparing yourself to somebody else, or I should be further ahead, or I should look different. And, so sometimes I feel that still is a struggle for many women. But there is also something that you said about being a collective group, and not to get political, but there's so many things, and I feel right now in the world that are influencing the way we feel about things, and other people or our communities. How can mindfulness help us when there's so much outside angst coming at us?
Well, one of the things that we learned is we can't control our external circumstances. We know this. I wish we could. I wish we could wave a magic wand and the world would be saner and kinder and more compassionate. It's not. What mindfulness can do is it can change our relationship to life, right? Whether it's the angst we have because of something in our relationship or with our children, or self-hatred or whatever that is, we can learn to have more compassion and kindness for ourselves, more awareness, for work with the difficult emotions that are happening. And if it's the external situation, I work with it every day. I'm careful how much news I take in. That's one thing, of course. I notice when I get into places of anxiety, and I use my mindfulness practice to work with that anxiety. So breathing, calming myself down, noticing what I'm feeling, noticing it in my body, which is one of the techniques of mindfulness. I notice when I go into grief or despair, I antidote it with joy. So I really try to bring as much joy as I can into my life to kind of uh, counteract the despair and the grief. And so it's a process. But the many, like, all I can say is, over, I think now 35 years of practicing mindfulness, I've learned many, many tools that I draw on for living in the midst of life every day. And that I'm so grateful for, that I have these things.
You have a really good vibe. Like, even just sitting here talking to you, I'm so much more relaxed than I was a half an hour ago. Um, but you've been teaching mindfulness for many years. Have you seen people's attitudes shift, and are they more accepting of the practices that you teach?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I started, it was a very fringe practice, and it kind of, I mean, obviously, these practices come out of Asia, where they're central in a lot of Buddhist religions throughout Asia. So, but in the United States, they were considered fringe practices, and they were kind of brought over maybe like by the hippies, and they started practicing it, and it was not considered very mainstream. And so I have, over the course of these many years, seen it go from this fringe into the mainstream in a really beautiful way, so that I'm seeing it integrated into healthcare and psychology, and it's brought into schools and education and universities and corporations and nonprofits. So I've seen this kind of mindfulness emerging into all these different sectors, and it's wonderful. And it's not without its problems, and it's
Of
not
course.
perfect, and it's definitely not like going to solve everybody's problems, but it's lovely to see that change. And maybe the acceptance is more like East Coast, West Coast, and not all throughout the US, or maybe it's more urban and less rural, but it's still this beautiful shift in the field over these 35 years.
Well, recently I'm in the Chicago area, and a couple of weeks ago, it was my yearly physical, and I have a female doctor, and I love her. I will follow her wherever she goes. And I think one of the nice things about why I'm so connected to her, because as we're talking and you're talking about different challenges, and she brought up just being present and breathing and being kind to yourself. And it was so refreshing to hear, because it wasn't all about a prescription, or even like HRT, or supplements. And that was the reason why I really wanted to talk to you today, because I feel that mindfulness can be one of those tools that a woman could use.
Yeah. So just to clarify, of course, that mindfulness isn't for everybody. So I mean, I want to just give a lot of permission that
Yes.
some people, they love it and connect with it, and other people, it's not their thing. But as long as there's something that we do to relieve stress, right? Because it is such a stressful time, and all the physical things that you're describing, emotional, mental. Um, so mindfulness is though I just want to define it. I define it as paying attention to our present moment experiences with openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with that experience. So it's really about working with our mind so that we can be in the present moment, not lost in the past, not lost in the future. If you were to check into your mind at any point in the day, you'd notice that it's probably thinking about the past, replaying it. Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Feeling bad. Or it's in the future, planning, imagining, obsessing, worrying, catastrophizing, worst case scenario. And mindfulness helps us work with these ruminations and come into the present moment. And in and of itself, it is a stress reduction tool. So just by doing it, so we can do it in two ways. We can do it as a meditation practice, and we can do it in the midst of daily life. As a meditation practice, it's something that you would, do every day, or people don't always do it every day, but every few days, and it becomes so it becomes a habit. And I start people off with meditating just like 5 minutes a day, because that's all that's all maybe women have time for, right? But if you
Right.
like it, then you can do more. And I'll give you resources and for people who are listening, and how to do that towards the end. But so developing it as a practice for the things that we're talking about here, that when you go into a doctor and you say, I'm stressed and I don't know if I want HRT, but I need to deal with my stress. Okay, a meditation practice there's a lot of science behind it showing that it can reduce stress, can help us work with difficult emotions, it can cultivate positive emotions, it can build attention, it can actually impact our brain structure. So, mindfulness as a tool is super helpful. It can start as a meditation practice, and once you kind of get the hang of it, then you use it in the midst of daily life. So, in that moment, in a way, when you were describing your visit with your doctor, like she was offering you mindfulness, right? She was kind of offering you an ear, listening, kindness, presence, right? She was present with you. And that's how we can learn to be with ourselves and with everyone else, with our children, with our spouses, with our partners. But we can learn to practice it for ourselves, and then we kind of embody it in our lives.
You teach and you talk a lot about natural awareness. Is that what you're referring to now? Or can you explain that to me?
Sure. Mindfulness is what I described, right? It's this ability to attend to the present moment experience. And we can attend to it in a very specific way. Like if we were all just to take a breath, like all of our listeners right now, to just, if you can close your eyes, or not if you're driving, of course, but or just taking a moment to notice your breath. So rising and falling of your chest or stomach area, release of air. You can just feel all the sensations of breath. So as you did that, I was asking everyone to be mindful. We were noticing the present moment. So mindfulness can be done in a very kind of focused way. And then mindfulness there are many ways to be mindful. And so one of the ways that I talk about is what's called natural awareness. And natural awareness is more like, let's say you're outside in nature and you suddenly just, like, you're automatically mindful. You know how that nature can sometimes do that for you, for some people, right? You're just like in the woods and there's this sense of like beauty and connection. You're present in your home. It's not like you're focusing specifically on something like I did the breath, but there's a natural quality of awareness that can arise. That's another kind of mindfulness. So that book that I wrote a book on called The Little Book of Being, about natural awareness, how we can both develop it through a meditation practice that can involve this kind of focused practice, and then we can also learn to appreciate it in life and just relax into this sense of profound well-being that is accessible for all of us at any moment.
Yesterday, I went to locally, there's arboretum by my house, and it was a rainy day, but I felt the need to I had to get out of the house. And just walking through nature and not having a deliberate reason why I was there, yeah, that you relax into it and you feel so much abundance and openness, and it has a huge calming effect on you. Even though we need to focus on awareness and compassion for ourselves, we're also juggling stress and anxiety. How do you think mindfulness, I mean, you've explained it a little bit, but how does it work that it brings that calm and really helps us refocus?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that mindfulness works. In and of itself, it can be a calming practice. So just regulating our breath, um, bringing attention into our body and mind, and not being pulled away by distractions. Learning. So mindfulness is not. There's a kind of a misconception that if you practice mindfulness meditation, for instance, your mind is going to go blank. But that's not what happens. What happens is we notice that our mind is thinking, and then we bring ourselves back to the present moment. And we teach ourselves how to be mindful through that act of coming back again and again and again. As we do that, our mind that is immensely distracted begins to get a little bit more focused. And as our mind gets more focused, it begins to calm down a little bit. And as it calms down, we start to have physiological experiences of calm and ease, and that becomes sort of enjoyable and present. Then, of course, that may happen. We may be calm a little bit, and then we have a thought that's anxiety producing. Oh no, I forgot that, I have to take my kid to this thing, and whatever it is. And then we notice that we're having that thought. We can see that we're lost in the thought, and we then gently come back into this present moment experience. So we're training ourselves not to follow through on thoughts. So thoughts, one of the things I like to teach is that thoughts are like train. You get on the train, and and you start worrying about something, and you worry even more, and you worry more, and the next thing you know, the train is 20 miles down the station, right? When you realize you're lost in thought, mindfulness can help us to get off the train. Like, okay, I'm lost in this thought. It's just a thought. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if that's my child is, never going to get into college or whatever your worry is, And then you get off the train, and there's peace in that moment. And you can start to teach yourself to not get on the train in the first place. When you notice the beginnings of those thoughts going, oh no, what's wrong with me? My body's changing. Okay, just take a breath. It's just a thought, and come back to the here and now. Notice your feet on the ground. It's like a constant working with our minds that tend to go into anxiety or go into ruminations, that we can learn to be present with ourselves, and there's alleviation of that kind of suffering.
So mindfulness is something that you're practicing almost constantly to be aware of your circumstances. And you talked about being present with difficult emotions. And can you tell me a little bit more about that? Because sometimes it's so hard to be, as a form of like self-protection, you go away from the emotion and not necessarily in it. How does that help to be present when something is really difficult and hard?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's very normal when you're feeling something that's difficult to not want to feel it, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just, watch TV or check my phone or drink a glass of wine or whatever it is. And sometimes that works, sometimes it works. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a negative thing, like talking to a friend or something might be a helpful thing to deal with it. But ultimately, distraction from our emotions is a kind of like a dead end street, because it just, in the end, it doesn't really work. What needs to happen from a mindfulness perspective, I'm just talking, is kind of allowing ourselves to feel the emotion and to let it move through us like weather patterns. Emotions are really like weather. They come and they go. We had so many emotions, and they just move through us. So we can begin to learn through mindfulness how to be aware of what's happening. And one of the best ways of doing it is to notice what's happening in our bodies. So a lot of times, let's say you're anxious and you have thought, oh no, I'm so stressed out. What's happening? It's like our mind is just racing, racing, racing. And you try to think your way out of it. But as you think your way out of it, you get more into the fear and the body sensations of fear. So if we can turn our attention into our body and what am I feeling? Okay, I'm afraid. My heart is racing. My stomach is clenched. My jaw is tight. And just bring that present moment awareness to it and some kindness and just let ourselves be with what's true, what's real for us. And then as we do it, we make some space for this. And sometimes it shifts, it morphs, it changes, it dissolves. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it stays the same or gets stronger. But what does develop with mindfulness is the capacity to hold ourselves in the midst of these emotions, to not lose our center, to not think the world is going to end, to simply like, okay, there's a lot of fear right now and I am here for myself. I can do it. So there's a lot of work. And because of this, mindfulness is incorporated into all these different clinical treatments for anxiety and depression because it's so effective and there's a lot of science behind that.
If you, and I'm sure you have, come across someone who might be a little skeptical about what you teach and how mindfulness might work for them, what do you suggest to help someone overcome that?
I don't think there's anything wrong with being skeptical. I actually think that's really wise. Like, why just assume what I'm saying is good? Try it. Well, what I'm always saying is just try it. Like, see what happens. If you're interested, try it. But if they're so skeptical that they think, why should I even try it? What I'll often do is talk about the science behind it and showing them what some of the research is, and that doesn't necessarily convince people. But I don't feel it's my job to convince people, but it might pique their interest, and then they go, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. It can help with my mental health. I want to give it a try. Here's the research behind it. But really, it's in the act of doing it, and that's what I've seen over the years, and I've taught hundreds of thousands of people over the years. And there are people who take to it like a duck to water and people who are like, yeah, that was cool. And I'll probably never do it again. And people, I don't want to, it's not my thing.
I'm sure you've taught the difference in your students has got to be right. I'm sure it's not all of the same age group or male, female. Is there one group that you find is most receptive? Is it more women? Is it more men, young, old?
Interesting question. I've noticed a lot of middle-aged women are interested in it. So you'll see that a lot when I teach there. That's probably a main demographic. At least that's what it was for a long time. And I think that's changing some. I think it's more, there's been a lot of work done to bring younger people in and youth meditation programs and so forth. So that's changing. And also there's some kind of like, what can I say, bro influencers who advocate meditation. And now there's like a whole contingent of younger men who are very interested in it. So there's a lot. It's hard to say. Exactly.
That's kind of funny, but I think we're able to connect with so many different people now that it's a lot easier to sort of spread the message, or if you're interested in something. Is there one simple way that a woman in midlife could bring a little more mindfulness into her day?
I like to teach a really simple practice, and it's called STOP, and it's an acronym. And so the STOP stands for stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. So what that would be like, and you don't have to meditate. I mean, I will recommend meditation and how people can do that. But if you just want to try mindfulness in the moment. So let's say you're feeling anxious or you're angry or you're depressed or something, or you're just sad. You just want to be mindful. You just remember to stop, and you stop and you take a breath, and everyone can do it right now at this moment. So we stop, we take a breath, and your eyes can be open or closed. It's up to you. And then observe what's happening inside me. Oh, my stomach is clenched, my heart's racing, I feel relaxed, I feel sad, I feel irritated. Just to notice for a moment what's happening. And then take another breath and let it be here. And then we proceed. P, we're done. And we hopefully proceed with more awareness. So it's just like a mini version of what I was describing with the emotions practice. It's just taking a moment for ourselves instead of we're in this like habitual movement forward of, frenzy, right? And so it's like pausing with the frenzy, checking in what's here with a kind awareness, and then moving on in life. So that's one of my favorite practices.
That's nice because you could do that no matter where you're at. If you're at work or in the car, and I could remember stuff. So that's good.
Exactly. That's the point of it.
If women wanted, or whomever is watching this today, if they wanted to connect with you or learn more about mindfulness, where's the best place to find you? And maybe your books, or what would you suggest?
Of different places. So the center at UCLA is called UCLA Mindful. If you just look it up, you'll find it. And there's classes and things that people can meditate with me on Thursdays at 12:30 virtually Pacific time.
I signed up for that, by the way, for
Fantastic.
September.
Great. So there's classes, events, and programs and stuff. So that's one thing. I have my own website, dianawinston.com, where I send out announcements of what I'm up to. I have a couple of books. One is the Little Book of Being, which we mentioned. Another is Fully Present, the Science, Art, and Practice of Mindfulness, that I co-wrote with a scientist. So we just had a second edition. And then I don't often say this, but I wrote a book for teenagers a long time ago called Wide Awake, A Buddhist Guide for Teens. So those are some things. And then lastly, I'm connected to several apps. So we have a free app with UCLA called UCLA Mindful, same as the center. And it has all these free meditations. New ones change every week. It has 3-minute meditations, 5-minute meditations. It has 19 different languages on it. So people can try these meditations, whatever is their home language. And that's a good place if you want to try to meditate and you don't want to do it in silence, go to one of these apps. And so that's the main one that I'm connected with, UCLA Mindful. Also 10% Happier. It's another one.
That's a great suggestion. And, I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time with me today. And I think mindfulness can have such a positive impact on women, especially when they're struggling through all these emotions and symptoms of midlife and menopause. So thank you, because I think this is going to be really helpful.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on Real Insights. If you want to hear more about how other women find calm in the chaos, order your copy of Empart: Real Stories, Real Wisdom, Real Menopause on Amazon today. And don't forget to join the conversation at joinempart.com. Until next time, remember that menopause is a journey, but you're not alone.